A woke atheist confronts Cliff with a shocking accusation that the Bible commands stoning of the homosexuals.
That it's moral to stone homosexuals.
But what happens next? It completely backfires.
What are you challenging? If you don't think God exists, what are you challenging?
You're about to witness an intense debate between Cliff and this woke atheist. He is challenged by a bold claim that God condones violence against the LGBTQ plus community. But instead of crumbling under pressure, because we know he doesn't crumble under pressure, Cliff breaks down the truth with historical, biblical, and moral clarity. And what he says makes this woke atheist completely regret asking this question.
Nothing is moral in an objective sense outside of God.
So you believe that something is moral based purely on the fact that God says that it's moral?
No. You've got to understand the thinking. The thinking is, because God created him with dignity, it is immoral for me to demean him, for me to hate him. Therefore, because God created him with dignity, and because God created me with a rational mind and a conscience, I am morally responsible to respect the man and to love him.
But you're saying essentially that morality comes from God.
Correct.
Okay.
Morality comes from God.
So the thing is, if morality comes from God, then therefore that morality is arbitrary because it is based on God or how God created morality, right?
No, that's why I was answering the way I was. Because God created him with value, therefore God says it is wrong for me to devalue him.
But God is saying that it's immoral for you to devalue him. Therefore God is specifically saying what is moral and what is immoral.
That's correct. God is saying what is moral and what is immoral. For a reason, though. Not arbitrarily.
The
For a reason.
reason is irrelevant. The thing is...
No, it's not irrelevant. Reasons are not irrelevant. That's why we think.
For the purposes of this question, the reason is irrelevant. The point is that God has decreed something is moral or immoral, correct? Based on dignity, creation, whatever you were saying.
Yes, based on dignity, him creating, yes.
So God has created morality in the way that he wants it to be.
Correct.
So by that logic, morality is arbitrarily based on what God perceives as moral or immoral, because he created you with dignity, etc., etc.
It is not arbitrary, first of all.
Well, it is arbitrary because it's literally him saying this is what's moral and this is what's immoral. That's what it comes down to. That's the definition of arbitrary.
It is not arbitrary because God's character is just, which means God's definition of right and wrong, justice and injustice, flows from his character. It is not arbitrary. Justice is based on the just character of God.
But even if I decide something for a particular reason, I'm still deciding it. And so, regardless of what that reason is, my decision of that, whatever it is arbitrary. I am deciding something is the way it is. Therefore, that decision is arbitrarily based on what I think.
I love your use of the word decision. You're absolutely correct. In order for there to be good or evil, in order for there to be justice and injustice, there has to be a mind that decides, a mind that thinks. This rock has absolutely no ability to distinguish between good and evil, right and wrong, justice and injustice. That tree has no ability to distinguish between good and evil, right and wrong, justice and injustice. You have to have a thinking, rational mind in order to distinguish between good and evil, right and wrong.
But the second that you have a being saying what is moral and what is immoral, then by virtue of that being deciding things are moral or immoral, it means that that being has the capacity to decide things are moral or immoral that may not necessarily line up with what everybody else thinks is moral or immoral.
What? Okay, that's great. That's exactly right. A lot of people disagree with what God commands. And what's your point?
So for example, God could say that it's moral to stone homosexuals. In fact, that you're required to stone homosexuals, okay? So if that's what God decrees as moral, then morality is arbitrary. And so if you go and look at what we view as moral as a society, we don't think that it's moral to stone people because they're gay, or at least most of us don't, the rational ones. However, could easily say this thing is moral, and we can't really challenge that, regardless of how we perceive morality.
You challenge it all the time, so do I. We're thinking human beings with a free will. We challenge God on a regular basis.
I challenge it because I don't think God exists. You can't.
Well, then what are you
challenge
challenging? If you don't think God exists, what are you challenging?
I'm challenging the fact that you claim that my morality is based on God.
No.
Or that my morality should be based on God.
No. All I'm saying to you is, ma'am, you don't believe God exists. I respect that. But now, if you're going to be consistent with your atheism, you're going to have to acknowledge that morality is relative.
Morality
There is no
relative.
God, and if there is no God, according to you, then morality is a crapshoot. It's just you make...
If there is no God, then there is no morality. Well, objective morality, and anyone decides what is right and wrong. That's all he's saying.
in your head. The KKK makes it up in its head. Gandhi makes it up in his head. And it's all relative. I'm just asking you to be consistent with your worldview. The same way you ask me to be consistent with my worldview, which is, I'm a follower of Christ, which means if you watch me go out and womanize after I finish speaking here, you're going to call me a what? A hypocrite. You're right, because I say I believe in Christ, and then I go out and womanize. That's hypocrisy. Similarly, I'm saying, if you say there is no God, which means morality is relative, then please don't live your life as if there are objective morals.
There aren't objective morals.
There are
I've
not.
never said that there are objective
Good.
morals.
So morality is relative, so just live that out.
Morality is relative. However, if you look at the things that we view as moral as a society, it goes back to things that help keep society together. For example, not murdering people. That is something that helps society to stay together. Because if we all, when we were, living in the plains of Africa and living a nomadic lifestyle before we were fully evolved, if we all went around killing each other, evolutionarily that wouldn't make very much sense.
But then why do people go around killing each other then if it doesn't make sense? Why in the world is stoning people wrong if everything is subjective? Even if you think it's wrong, someone else might not think it's wrong, so then therefore they're able to do it.
And we all wouldn't be able to survive as a species. So therefore we consider murder immoral because it helps our survival as a species.
Okay, so the basis of your morality is survival of the species. Is that right? Have I heard you right?
For some of it, yeah.
Okay. Well, then why do you care about what happens to handicapped people? Handicapped people are a drain on your limited resources, so why do you care about handicapped people?
That was in the context of previous, before we were as evolved as we are now. So now we're evolved to the point that we can see that people on an individual basis still have value.
I don't know, she's struggling there. She's like, that was before, but now it's different.
The whole may be meaningless, at least from your perspective of
From your perspective.
Exactly.
Thank you.
So life doesn't have to have a meaning. That's
Right.
one of the questions that doesn't really need an answer. Some questions don't deserve answers, like what is the meaning of life? The answer doesn't matter because there is no answer. And so life as a whole doesn't matter, but the relationships between people do matter. So handicapped people matter, and gay people matter, and people of different races matter, not because God created them that way, but because on an individual basis we connect as humans and we recognize our humanity in each other.
Well, I love your emphasis on connecting with people. That's exactly what Jesus said. Jesus said the purpose of life is to connect with God and to connect with people, to love God with your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and to love your neighbors yourself. So you're spot on. According to Christ, God created us to connect with Him and to connect with each other. Not in racism, in sexism, not in hating gay people, but in loving and respecting all people.
It's awfully hypocritical that religion has been used to justify such things, isn't it?
Exactly. And that's why you need to read the Gospels, because when you read the Gospels,
Thank you. I have.
well, then what's the sin that Jesus attacked? You've read the Gospel, so you tell me. What is the sin that Jesus attacked most harshly?
You tell me. You're the one.
No, you said you read the Gospel, so you know.
Yeah, I read
What is
them
the
when I was
sin that
12.
Christ attacked most harshly? The sin of irreligious hypocrisy. He reserved his most scathing words for the religious hypocrites of his day. They were called Pharisees. They pretended to know God, but then they contradicted God with their self-righteousness, their racist attitudes, And Christ nailed him verbally. He said, you guys are hypocrites. So you have nothing to worry about. Jesus agrees with you. If anyone says, I'm a follower of Christ, and I hate that gay person, or I hate that person of a different race, they're contradicting the Jesus they say they believe in.
God doesn't says to hate anyone, first of all, let alone gay people. He says to love those people who are different. Love your enemies. Pray for those who persecute you. Nothing against hate. Sometimes, though, the problem is people assume that you hate them because you disagree with them. That's the problem.
Guess what? I bet, although I don't know, but I'm going to conjecture that you've been hurt by some Christians. Well, guess what? The African Americans in the United States have been hurt far worse than you have by Christians. They were enslaved. Their great-grandparents were enslaved in this country by white Christians.
At what point did
But those black Christians today have the open-mindedness not to allow a white Christian racist to turn them off to the true Jesus who didn't have a racist bone in his body. That's real open-mindedness.
Birth.
Pardon?
Yeah, because they've been indoctrinated since birth.
You think black Christians in the United States have been
I think every
indoctrinated
religious person has been
since
indoctrinated.
birth, and that's why they believe in Jesus? Do you know?
Every person makes that point of view who seems like they haven't done a lot of research. It's so dehumanizing, or they can't have opinion for themselves to say that you're indoctrinated. But the people who are an atheist were not indoctrinated, apparently, because they know the truth, apparently.
Elitist, how intolerant, how narrow-minded and bigoted that is? Black Christians have their own brains. They use their own minds. And for you to insist that black people are Christians because they've been indoctrinated.
I didn't say specifically black people. I said all religious people.
We were talking about black folks, all right?
You're the one who-
Let's talk about the context, and you know exactly what you were saying. Then poor dumb black people are Christians because they've been
That's
indoctrinated.
absolutely not what I
That's
said.
exactly what you inferred crystal clearly, ma'am.
I said every religious person.
Yeah, well, I find that to be incredibly intolerant. Intolerant up the wazoo and judgmental.
That they've been
There are many devout Muslims who honestly follow Muhammad because they've read the Quran, not because they've been indoctrinated and they blindly believe. And there are many devout Hindus who have studied the Bhagavad Gita and the Upanishads, and they follow Hinduism not because they've been indoctrinated, but because they've made their own decision. And there are many atheists who are atheists because they've thought through the issue and they think there is no God. And for me to say, oh, all you atheists have just been indoctrinated, is incredibly bigoted, narrow-minded, and intolerant. Shouldn't think that way.
Else challenges you too.
All right, thank you for raising.
Dang, she just walked away. That's very hypocritical because a lot of atheists probably grew up in a Christian household. They probably been indoctrinated, but they don't have the same viewpoint. And a lot of atheists who grew up in an atheistic household were now Christians. So you can't just blame indoctrination. Everyone has their own free will to choose whether or not they want to follow Jesus or not.